Шановні колеги, ми продовжуємо нашу роботу і наразі ми розпочинаємо брифінг на тему «Бюджетна політика. Прагматичні підходи до стратегічних характеристик».
I would like to invite the representatives of the Institute for Social and Economic Studies. And the topic of the briefing is budget policy, pragmatic approach to strategic decisions. We would like today to draw attention of the society to one of the most important issues, the issue of budget policy in the country. The country has a budget, and it defines how much taxes should the citizens pay and how the taxes will be used. But for the budget to reflect people's intentions, desires, in many countries there is a document called budget resolution, budget declaration, but it is to show the society, the intentions of the government on how the taxes will be used next year. In Ukraine, unfortunately, we don't have this document, and we see the budget after it's passed, after it's approved, the changes in taxes, salaries, tariffs, and so on. So the Institute of Social and Economic Studies decided to start the discussion on the budget policy. And today we would like to present this research and to initiate the public discussion. That was Anatoliy Maksiuta, ex-Deputy Minister of Economy of Ukraine, board member at the Institute for Public and Economic Studies.
Інституту суспільно-економічних досліджень. Проаналізувавши питання
Having analyzed the issue of forming the budget starting from 2000, we came to the conclusion that our budget policy has such main problems: dependence on economic and political issues, low quality of planning and execution of the budget, and low transparency. So the dependence on political and economic issues, the laws on state budget are submitted and approved without proper working on them. And also revenues to the budget depend not on the capacity of the economy, but on the requirements of the budget, and that negatively affects business. Non-efficient spending in budget sector leads to the need in higher financing. And we can show that the result of this discrepancy between economic policy of the state, budgetary policy of the state, and fiscal policy is the situation with our debt, when last year it was about 80% of the GDP. The state was ignoring how this all will influence the situation with the debt policy.
Для поповнення статутних капіталів підприємств. Зростання зовнішнього боргу пов'язане напряму із проблемами валютного курсу. Як результат, це неякісний економічний
Our key initiatives are: what can we do? First, we need to implement strategic planning into the budgetary process. Secondly, we recommend to introduce two-level system of adopting the budget to minimize the opportunity to introduce changes at the last stage. In summer, to approve main parameters, and in autumn, to approve the budgetary allocations. Also, to reform the bodies of power that are responsible for forming and execution of the budget. We have to implement measures to strengthen the participation of local communities in budgetary process. We suggest to reformat the activities of the Regional Development Fund. Now it's just the line in the budget, but we want it to function as the financial institution so that it can finance long-term projects. And we also suggest to ensure the observation of all the time frames of execution of the budget. Thank you. Good afternoon, esteemed participants. I'm Svitlana Kovalivska. I'm the Deputy Director on Development of the Institute of Public and Economic Studies. I would like to talk about reforms which are an important component of the policy. We believe that the process of budgetary process and the process of approving reforms are to be interlinked, that state and the local budget should become the instrument to implement reforms. The society believes that the money invested will attract minimum 3-5 hryvnias of private investments per 1 hryvnia of state investments, and these will be investments into infrastructure, into industry. Such approach should be directed towards the change of the structure of the economy to high-tech technology, and it will ensure the revenues in long term. Such financial flows will help us change our debt policy. We will not depend on foreign loans. We will ourselves define the strategy, our development strategy, and it is important to have the project approach to forming reforms and to other things.
Я принесла папку з відповідями на наш запит, який ми направляли до минулого уряду стосовно того, чи є плани реформ.
We sent a request to the previous government on whether there is the plan of reforms and how much money is allocated for implementation of the reforms, and we received answers from everyone. And the answer is the reforms are taking place in accordance with plans. The plans are outlined in the draft laws, and that is in accordance with the budget allocated to a certain body. But reform is not just the norm of the law. The society expects from authorities effective measures. If we suggest to create the fund which will finance roads, then we expect that we will have high-quality roads. I would like to give you an example.
Не треба їхати для цього за кордон, всі
We
це
shouldn't
мають
go
справу з,
abroad. We
донорами,
all are
які
dealing with
вимагають для
donors.
того, щоб отримати кошти, що проєкт. І у всіх у них вимоги різні, але вони зводяться
All of them have different approaches.
Має бути чіткий план
There should be a clear
на що буде потрачено,
action plan, and then the competition, and then
якщо не ефективно потратив кошти,
Більше коштів не отримаєш. Так, вони відповідають.
відповідально ставляться
So,
до коштів своїх громадян. Чому ж Україна,
why
по суті, зухвало
should
відноситься
Ukraine
до витрачання коштів платників податків
not care about spending of the
частини своїх бюджетів?
taxes
В цьому питання
that citizens pay?
дійсно змінити підходи.
We need to change approaches.
Реформа державної служби. Всі
And
знають, що
such
в
an
2015
example as reform of the civil service. European Union mentioned that they will give the support to the reform. Civil servants will receive some addition to their salary if the government prepares the strategy how this money will be spent. And the delay in that resulted in our reforms becoming very expensive.
Коли структура видатків, капітальних видатків державного бюджету складається таким чином, що переважна більшість йде на поточні видатки, лише 7%
Most of money spent for capital investments. Looking at the functional structure of the state budget, this mostly goes for social issues. Look at that. Where will we get this long resource from to finance the development? The answer is just one. It will be taken from loans. Loans are spent for current expenditures now. But we will start implementing reforms with business plans, with financial plans. But they should have a very clear list of measures, not just changes in legislation, but funding some of the measures. Let it have not just budgetary money, but other. In my research, we also give some other proposals so that based on the plan of reforms, we ensure development of budget strategy. We need to accumulate the development expenditures, and that's explained on our website. The money from privatization should be used for investment projects. Please look at our proposals at the website.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Marianna. My name is Marianna Onufryk. I'm expert in social policy of the same Institute of Social and Economic Research. All the research of our institute and the policy of our work are aimed at ensuring decent life to our people. So this our budgetary research was based not upon the assumption that the social expenses are huge, and our suggestion was not just to cut down some social programs aimed at social protection of Ukrainian people, but we suggested to raise effectiveness of spending. That is, each hryvnia spent on social needs would improve the quality of life of Ukrainian people. That's why we had stated 5 principles of the social policy on the framework of budget policy. First principle is the principle of responsibility. When the social assistance is provided only to those people who need it, that is means testing. The Ministry of Finance has started necessary verification of this means, but it should be based on the full enjoyment of human rights. Another testing way is to check the means based on the means testing, when the welfare of each person is checked, to prevent a situation that is social assistance is provided to people who have several real estate properties. The second principle is the target principle, that is that the money are delivered to specific to individual people. This, which means in our situation, monetization of services, and when individuals receive their monetized services instead of institutions and organizations. In order to do this, we should be able to provide necessary civil monetized services as close to people as possible. Nevertheless, delegation of responsibilities in social sphere should be financially supported. And the state could delegate its social responsibilities not just to the lower level of governments, but to some, for example, civil society organizations. In the entire world, up to 70% of some services or functions are carried out by civil society organizations, or strengthening the social responsibility of businesses. The principle of this was about the third principle subsidiarity. The fourth principle is about efficiency, about cost efficiency, and principle number 5, this is sustainability. The cost efficiency. A good example is the system of asylums and shelters. And, for example, care centers for children without parental care, where much money are simply wasted. Also, it is necessary to optimize functions of the bodies and social sphere, and and to introduce electronic governance, which we mentioned quite often, about joint register of subsidy holders, of those who are liable to privileges. The principle of sustainability, which provides for sustainability of services provided by the state under all the conditions which is possible under diversification of sources in social sphere. For example, the compulsory accumulative pension system and development of insurance. Good afternoon. I'm consultant in the Institute of Social Research. There is a paradox that we have efficient and well-structured fiscal system. At the same time, we have big problems in budgetary sphere. I think the main fault is that we make an absolute value out of the quantitative indicators. For example, the budget declaration. This section, major objectives of the budgetary policy, which are mentioned about all the final figures. This is the document about figures, not about strategy. Then there is the conflict of goals which appears between different managers of budget funds. So one of the objectives is budget consolidation, the objectives of monetary policy, the objective of social policy reform, the the development of the regions. Actually, all the key structures that should implement the state budget, that they have to spend this budget for the sake of society, they conflict with each other. All this wastes the efforts, and actually this conflict of goals resulted in in a huge number of problems which go beyond the budgetary process itself. And when there are periods of economic growth, this resource wasting model proved to be vital. Then in this situation, when the government is unable to continue its parental policy and parental role in the economy, and nevertheless it is unable to carry out its function. The problem could be solved via dropping out of the vicious circle that we described. What we suggest, we should get rid of the balance sheet approach and make strong emphasis on the stimulating function. In order to implement this approach, we need to stimulate restructuring in the country. What can we do today, preparing to the budget 2017? The Parliament can request from the Ministry of Finance strategic vision for the budget 2017 to pass this document, and due to this, the document might become the roadmap for the budget 2017, and our experts are ready to assist in to assist the government with our recommendations. I think that the new strategy-based approach will allow to formulate consolidated goals, will raise trust to the government policy, and will make the state policy the efficient instrument in transformation of the country. Thank you very much. Since we are watched by maybe those people who are not very much familiar with economic terminology, could you explain in plain language what you suggest? So I think this will be a good final to our briefing, and I would like to give the floor to Mr. Maksiuta. We have heard the findings of our survey, which brought us to the conclusion that the current budgetary policy and the budget are not the instruments for the country's development. This is just a response to the current events, current situation. The former budgetary considerations were not accepted by Verkhovna Rada because they did not express the societal goals. That's why we believe that the major foundations of the budgetary policy should become the main document submitted to the parliament. The parliament has to approve it, and the government has to develop the budget based on that principles and submit it to Verkhovna Rada, and this will ensure that the people's will be provided via the state budget policy next year. What the society should know about the budget. Foreign experience suggests that there should be a rather limited list of priorities for the budget of next year, just 1, 2, 3, maximum 5 top priorities. For example, in some countries, increasing competitiveness of the economy might be the top principle, which when they project some measures in this direction, then they set some indicators of that raised competitiveness that should be measured. Then the top priorities for funding in the reforming process. Today, when people ask questions whether reforms are underway, whether they are successful or not, and in our budget statement, we should explain what are top priorities in terms of reform for the current year and how that budgetary goal will be reached. This budget statement should be a compulsory document to be drafted and submitted to Verkhovna Rada, and our institution is ready to offer its assistance in producing such a document in order to ensure transparency, confidence, and efficiency of the budget. Thank you very much, dear experts. As far as I know, you have posted the result of our survey on your website, whether it will be translated into English. Yes. And We hope that the advisors who work in the Cabinet of Ministers will hear you, that the project office, which will be established under the Minister of Finance, also will hear, and let us hope that the budget this year will be better than the previous one. And dear friends, the next briefing will be in some minutes.